Welcome to Financial Behavior Thought Leaders. I'm Mary, and this podcast takes you behind the scenes with top speakers in financial services. So whether you're a financial advisor, booking a client event, an event planner looking for the perfect keynote, or a financial professional wanting to learn from industry thought leaders, you're in the right place. And today we're featuring Matt Halloran, one of the Financial Behavior Keynote's exclusive speakers. Matt is a branding and podcasting strategist who's redefining how financial professionals show up, connect, and lead. His keynote, Be Irreplaceable, the ultimate competitive edge for financial advisors, Matt does not hold back. He's all about radical authenticity, meaningful communication, and building trust that lasts. So you're in for a powerful conversation. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, I love having you, and I actually need to know the answer to this question. How in the world did you get started speaking?
Well, so all the way back in college, so I have my bachelor's degree in applied ethics, which is a philosophy degree, which could be a whole podcast in itself. And my minor was in communications, and I had to do my last project, and the professor said, you can do one of two things. You can write a paper on something that we covered in this, 3 years, or you can go out and give a public speech. And I was the only person in my class that opted to do a public speech. And I walked up to her office hours afterwards, and I said, she was my mentor. I said, look, I'm going to do the speech. And she's like, yep, it doesn't surprise me. And I said, well, what do you mean? She's like, nobody opts for the speech. And I was like, well, tell me how we coordinate this, right? Because you need to see me speak. And she says, well, what's going to happen is you're going to stand, and we walked out of her office. She said, you're going to stand right here at noon tomorrow, or whatever it was. I don't remember what it was. And you're going to start your speech. And I said, well, there's nobody here. And she's like, that's the point. And I was like, okay, let's go. So, I didn't really get dressed up because whatever, my beard was red and about as long as it is now, a little bit longer. And I was probably wearing hippie overalls and Birkenstocks. And so I got up on this ledge, which she didn't tell me to get up on the ledge, but I was like, if I'm going to get people's attention, I'm going to get up on a ledge. And I started talking about the parking fines that we had at Western Michigan University that were excessive. And through a bunch of protesting and pressure that we put on them, they actually reduced the cost of these. But so noon on the dot, I'm standing up there and I'm like, hey, I want everybody's attention. Are you tired of the parking fines at Western? And like all of a sudden, all of these people started coming around. And I think I did about 20 minutes. She was there the whole time. And then I said, hey, thank you very much. You guys need to, march down to the wherever parking fine. I don't remember what the call to action was. And she was like, okay, so you were meant to do this. And then in financial services, I presented to my old mentor, who's now named Omani Carson. Back then he was Ron Carson. And I told him that I wanted to create a communications institute for financial advisors based off of my background as a therapist. And so I literally walked into his office and gave him a 15-minute presentation. And he said, okay, well, you're on stage. That's all we needed to see. And it was him and Steve Sandusky at the time and my boss, Laura Pearson. And they're like, okay, you're going to be speaking at the next Excel meeting. And so that was it. And it's my happy place. I know that sounds corny, and probably a lot of speakers say that, but you put me on a stage in front of 10,000 people and I'm happier than you'll ever imagine.
So really for you, this is like a natural thing that was just boiling up inside and it just needed to come out. It really wasn't a ton of work or practice. I mean, you practice along the way, but it's really been inside you for a while.
No, this is what I'm supposed to do, right? It's so many people have said this to me, I can't believe you can do that. And I'm in my mind, I'm like, I can't believe you can't.
Yeah, because it's so
like somebody who's
natural.
like really good at playing basketball or a sport or something like that. It's like, I'm built for this. I just got back from Florida. You had gotten me a gig down in Florida, and I just got done, and I remember just getting off the stage and just thinking to myself, man, I just want to do this more often. And then of course, you get all of the people coming up to you afterwards and, all of that praise, which by the way, is something you really have to learn how to manage as a speaker, because it can not always do great for your
Go to your head.
For the head. But
Pretty
yeah,
quick.
I don't want to get ahead of myself. So yeah.
Well, and so Matt, you kind of highlighted a quick moment that I think we need to go back to because for those that don't know your background, not only are you a unique speaker, but you just have a unique background. So can you give us a quick highlight of where you come from that plays in such a big role in what you speak on?
Yeah, I definitely haven't had a linear path in my career. What I really firmly believe is the wind. I believe in the wind. You can call it whatever you want. But the wind constantly blows me. And I found when I was young, if I turned and faced the wind, I didn't get very far and I got very tired. But if I trusted in the wind and I put it at my back, it's pretty amazing how light and easy decisions are because I have that wind support behind me. So Navy, so I didn't go to college right out of high school because I couldn't get in. Navy, and then I got my degree in applied ethics and communications. My wife, I got a biomedical ethics internship where I taught doctors and nurses and helped people with end of life decisions. Then my wife and I worked at a place called Boys Town where we lived with 36 at-risk teenage boys over 4.5 years. Became a therapist, found out I wasn't built to be a therapist after $70,000 of student loans. Then I became a consultant in financial services. And so I worked at a place called Peak. And Peak was, I was the life coach. And so my master's degree is actually in counseling therapy and life coaching. And so I would life coach financial advisors. And that's really how I got into this industry. And so I work at Peak, what's now called Carson Consulting, for about 4.5, 5 years. Then I realized I could do it on my own, went out on my own. And then in 2016, I met this crazy Canadian guy at a conference. He and I just really hit it off. He was a marketing and branding expert. I was a practice management expert. And we wanted to fundamentally disrupt how financial advisors marketed. We didn't really know what that looked like. And then all of a sudden, we created Proudmouth. We're the largest podcasting company for financial advisors, and we've done over 10,000 episodes now. So yeah, it's not a linear.
No.
It wasn't like I graduated from college and became a CPA, right? So
yeah, it wasn't like you stood up and said, "This is it, and we're heading there." I love it. I think it's fascinating because it really does, and that's kind of where we're moving into is it's you. This is who you are, and I think that's one of the things you resonate so well with others is helping teach them and build their own authentic brands. You're a renowned podcaster. And what I think is so interesting about you too is you stand out in crowds, no matter where you go. And so, talk to me. Why are these themes so critical for financial planners today? How do they tie into that bigger picture of trust and connection?
well, the problem is everything is so commoditized, right? And in fact, one of the things that I do say in my speech is most of what you all hang your hat on at what makes you different, my AI can do better than you can. And I'm not trying to be mean necessarily. It's just the truth, right? All of the pie charts and bar graphs and eking out an extra 2% in the S&P or not losing an extra 2%. I mean, all of that sort of stuff. Listen, that's table stakes now, guys. You're done. You just check that box. It's not your tech. It's not your reporting. It's not your cash flow analysis. It's not any of that. What it is your personality and your focus. Right? People buy you. The world has fundamentally changed, Mary. That's the world we live in. And you have to lean into that. And the other thing too, is if you look like everybody else, so what are you doing? Right? One of my favorite things that I love to say, and I actually say it daily now, because I'll have people come in and ask me about their marketing. And I'll say, okay, well, you know what? Who's your target market? And of course, Mary, you know this. They'll say, people 5 years from retirement who have $2 to $10 million of investable assets. It's like, okay, great. So you think that your marketing is going to outspend Ken Fisher? And they're like, what? It's like, you're trying to compete with a guy who spends $10 million a month, right? You don't have 10 million. You don't have $1,000 a month, right? So you have to hyper focus. You have to be very, very specific. And I like to talk about that on stage. I generally will interact with the audience, say, okay, who has a niche? And everybody raises their hand. And I said, is it women? And then they all put their hand down, right? It's 51% of the population. That's not a niche. How many of you are only working with people who are 5 years from retirement? Put your hand down. That's not a niche, right? And then, a couple of people keep their hand up and, okay, who do you work with? I work with dentists. Okay, now we're talking. Now I can create a marketing plan for you because you have the right focus.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and this is all tying directly into your keynote, Be Irreplaceable, which, by the way, can I just say, I love that title. It's so unique. And so tell us a little bit more, give me more on that core message, who it's suited for, and what they're going to walk away with after hearing this speech.
Well, it really is suited not just for BD conferences, RIA conferences, for, a speaker to an advisor. This works really well in leadership because, again, in the world that we live in, listen, you have to be irreplaceable, no matter if you're an executive leadership team, if you're, going to a CEO conference and hanging out with a whole bunch of CEOs. You are all replaceable until you make yourself not replaceable. And I start the story off, or I start the whole presentation off about when I was in the Navy and I was in a drill and I had to make a very aggressive decision about an action. And I'm not going to give all of that away because it's really kind of, good opportunity for you to hear my speech. But basically what it is we can always get a new captain. So the military is set up that if this person gets taken out, there's 10 other people who can step up. And we live in that world today, especially in the world of providing advice. If you're gone, they're going to find another advisor. They're probably not going to remember you in 5 years. So how do you make it so that you're not only going to be your client's advisor, but everybody in that family's advisor? And that's the whole point. And so there's really 4 major points. Number 1, you have to realize that you are replaceable and you need to figure out if you want to be irreplaceable. Number 2, you have to accept that you don't know everything. And this is a little bit of a slapping the audience around a little bit. And I tell a very, very humiliating story about all of the stuff I don't know. And then the third part is that you have to realize that there are the right tools for the right job. And I talk about a story that I had that involved a copious amount of roaches when I was in college. And then the last thing is it's really all about being present and available. So all of the things, when you accept those first 3 things, and then the system that we teach, which is called the atomic content method, which is how you become irreplaceable. And then the last thing is doesn't matter about all of the content, which is wildly important. What really matters is you have to authentically be yourself and be present with your clients. And when you have those 4 things together, you're entirely irreplaceable.
I love that. And so, Matt, dig into this authentically you. I can't even say that.
Yeah.
You go.
Yeah.
How do
So
you say?
when you want to be authentically you, right? It really is Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde said, you might as well be yourself because everybody else is taken. And I just don't understand. In growing up in this industry, as you and I both have, right? When I got in 2006, it was all about the cars and the watches and the suits and the dresses and the pumps and the, designer bags and the, I have a jet and, my house is this many square feet and I make this much money. And there's still some of that left. And I remember sitting, we had something called the $1 Million Producer Roundtable before the big conferences that we had at Peak. And I'm sitting at this table with all of these people, and so they all looked alike, right? I mean, they really, really did. They were all wearing ridiculous clothing and whatever cufflinks, that had diamonds in it and all this crap. And then this guy came in and he sat down and we were in Arizona. He came in and said he was wearing flip-flop shorts and a Baja, kind of like a shirt. And they're just railing this guy. What do you, gosh, you look so terribly unprofessional and all of this, what are you doing? By the way, he was the largest producer at the table. No question. I think he was making 10, 15 million a year, right? And everybody else was making 1 to 2. And he said, this is what my clients dress like. And not just trying to make it the physical representation, because I do think that's a huge component of it. But if you're meeting with teachers and you're wearing a $10,000 suit, you look like a salesperson.
Yep.
Right? You don't look like your ideal client. And the other thing that always makes me giggle about the physical appearance, and then I'll talk about some of the other things, is I always ask people, because I get a lot of guff, Mary. I'm sure it doesn't surprise you. I wear a buffalo check, red and
Mhm.
black jacket on stage. I wear a ball cap. I've got these custom Nikes and jeans. And, people are like, well, why aren't you wearing a suit and tie? I was like, what does Richard Branson wear? Does he wear a ridiculous suit? No, he wears a white shirt, jeans, and some loafers, right? Well, I want to dress like the people who I want to become instead of the people who you think I should be. And I think that's another huge component of really truly being yourself. Most advisors, most experts don't share enough about themselves. So we firmly believe in the 4-to-1 rule. I talk about this on stage, that for every 4 professional posts, you need to have 1 personal post. And you need to post so that people feel that authentic connection, right? I can't tell you how many times I just did something on LinkedIn, me holding one of my chickens. So I have chickens. I love my chickens. I mean, they're great pets and they give me unbelievable food that, by the way, is wildly expensive at the time of this recording. And I have all of these people, like, they'll come up to me at conferences, or they'll come up to me, after this. Oh my God, I've got those same kind of chickens. Or have you ever tried this? Any sort of things that you can have that real connection with is what people really want. They don't want the bravado of all the alphabet soup after name. Just so you all know, that's just expected. That's
Mhm.
expected, that you're an expert, It's that personal connection that makes the difference, especially in multi-generational stuff, which is really what the Be Irreplaceable keynote is about, is how are you going to become the family's advisor and getting the attention of the kids and grandkids? The only way to do that is you have to, well, be transparent and be yourself.
So, Matt, this comes so naturally to you. I mean, you've obviously from college have stuck out in a crowd, right? With the beard, with everything else. Not everyone feels that. How do you, so for those of us that struggle not fitting into the crowd, what's some tips? How do you
Well,
help?
so thank you for saying that, but I have a picture that I actually, it's well out of reach, so I can't grab it right now, of me actually doing the exact opposite. Um, when I
Mhm.
got into financial services, I got caught up in everything I just talked about. The suits, the cars. I mean, I bought cars I couldn't afford because I thought it was all about appearances. I mean, that's not true. I could afford them. I shouldn't have. It was ridiculous, right? Cufflinks, shoes, watches, all of I got really, really stuck into it because I thought that I had to be that person. And honestly, in your, the audience might not love that I'm about to say this, but it really is, you have to work on yourself. It's really difficult to love other people if you don't love yourself first.
Mm.
Yeah. And so, as
Yeah.
corny as that sounds, remember, I was a therapist, right? I mean, I go everywhere when it comes to these speeches. My speeches are wildly emotional. People cry in the audience. People laugh in the audience when I'm talking about these things, because I need you to realize that you have to work on yourself. You can't truly be irreplaceable unless you're willing to do a little bit of work. And that's where you find that comfort, right? That's where you find the power, the strength in order to truly be your authentic self.
Matt, I love this. I guess one last question for you here is we're talking so much, even in marketing, about being you, being that authentic you, being okay with you. You're going into therapy. So let's kind of go to the higher level. We've just added financial psychology in like it's brand new, and I'm going to put in quotes, brand new for us as CFPs, very old for those of you as psychologists. What do you see coming as far as a transition as more financial advisors start to understand what this is and how they feel impacts everything they do?
Well, we're already seeing huge results with people who are leaning more into what you guys have been teaching and what your PhD's in, right? It's the idea of there is so much surrounding emotion around a behavior around money that if you actually address that, that's when everything changes. Your conversations, they don't care what's happening in the market because they know that their behaviors, they're right with themselves, they have the right mindset, and they have the right behaviors. Um, it's the future. And look at advisors there, and they're all over the place, who are just killing it now, Mary, because they're changing the conversation and they're not having to do the same level of prospecting. They don't ever really sell, right? Because people come in and they're like, Mary, I love you. Like, I feel a connection with you and I want to work with you. And by the way, just full disclosure for the audience, that's what happened with us. I met you. We had a deep connection. We had wonderful conversations about everything under the sun besides you being my agent. And I was like, look, I felt a deep connection with you. That deep connection is what advisors have been wanting. You know, George Kinder many years ago started the Life Planning Institute. He's the godfather of holistic financial planning. Even though I don't think he really realized that it's now going to be considered behavioral finance, right? But that's what it is, right? The first question that we were supposed to ask, because I went through his training, was, what is your first memory of money? Now, just to be clear, you have to be really prepared to deal with that answer because it's super emotionally charged 99.9% of the time. And unless you have gone through training in how to really actually deal with emotions positively, right? What a lot of us do is we'll pat people on the back, we'll push Kleenexes across the desk, and that's basically pattern interruption to get you to stop crying or being upset. And as a therapist, my whole background was, listen, if I try to hold that wave back, it's going to get worse and worse and stronger and stronger. So what I want to do is you just let those emotions wash over you and me. And I don't care how long it takes, because it's usually about 5 minutes, just so you know. So 5 minutes, you're angry, you're sad or whatever. I give you the space to cry, feel angry, upset, frustrated, whatever. And then after that emotion is passed, that's when you can say, okay, I really appreciate, experiencing that with you, because now I feel like I know you a lot better. And see, these are little things that in behavioral finance and that I know as a recovering therapist, that I think is really important for your audiences to understand that that's the level of engagement. That's the level of relationship that you need to have with all of your clients and your prospects.
Matt, what I really like about that is the fact that again, goes back to the work within you. Because if you can be okay with the person on the other side of the table really having a breakdown, whether it's anger, whether they're yelling, whether they're crying, doesn't matter the emotion, and you can sit with it, that says something about you as well, that you are okay with that.
Well, I think what a lot of advisors, and actually this is a huge part of my speech after I tell the story about my time in the Navy, is that it's not about you. We make so much about ourselves, and it's just not about you. And of course, I mean, I've also written a whole book on how to shut the F up and listen. And the majority of that really is just how can you sit in that discomfort, right? We are always trying to fill that space. We don't like silence. It's terrifying because then we're alone with our own thoughts, getting back to working on yourself. I want that silence. I want that emotion present. I want to be the first person, Mary, that you've ever said that to, and I didn't make you feel anything but supported. Oh my God, that is the world that we need to live in. And we can just make the world a better freaking place just by adopting the fact that, listen, I'm going to sit with you. You get done saying something. I'm just going to sit there and give you a few minutes to process. Few minutes, actually, it's really seconds, by the way, but just give you that time to process, because most of us don't realize what's coming out of our mouths, and it takes a couple of seconds for our brains to catch up. And if I give you that space, everything changes in our relationship.
Well, that's the gift, right? That is the gift you are giving them, is that listening. I love that you brought up the book, by the way. I'm so glad, because it really is the impetus of everything is shut up and listen. And the more you listen, the more they're going to grow and you're going to grow from that experience.
It makes your job so much easier. So many of you are trying to put these unbelievable presentations together with, pulling from all of these pieces of software, which I'm not saying that's not important. And yes, people need to know where they are, right? I totally get that. That should be like 3% of your whole conversation.
I love it. So, Matt, You have taught us so much. You've also given us some unique insight. I have one final question. You were a former radio host. Tell us about that.
Well, my high school had a 100-watt radio station, which basically meant it went about a mile radius from the school itself. It's called WKDS. And I was 13 years old and I found out that there was a radio club, and I was like, okay, because I'm a huge music guy. I played music, but I love music. And so I volunteered. It was I had an extra period, or I don't remember how. No, it was after school. It was after school, and it was before soccer practice, and I could do half hour, an hour, or whatever the show was. And I was Madman Matt Halloran. And I remember getting done with my first show, and it was funny because we could only play like 10 songs because we only had rights to like these 10 songs. And by the way, this is how old this was. So not only did we have actual turntables, right? So, and you had to learn how to back it up so it didn't go zoop into the song. But we also had these things called carts, which are basically like 8 tracks. And I helped produce the commercials where we had a razor blade and Scotch tape because they were literally on tapes. I'm that old. I'm very proud of that, by the way. And I remember getting done with my first show, Matt Halloran. I just got done playing like a Metallica song that was totally clean. We were allowed to play. And I ran into my advisor's office. Her name was Chris Kirkpatrick. And I said, Mr. Patrick, oh my God, I just had the most amazing experience. I know what I want to be when I grow up. And she said, well, I hope it's not a DJ because that industry's dying. And at 13, Mary, I knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. And she dashed me across the rocks. But I continued to do it. So I did it all through high school. I was actually going to try to do that in the Navy, and the job wasn't open. So when I got back, when I got discharged from the Navy and I was done with my enlistment, I became the news director at WIDR, which was my college radio station. And I did that for 3 years. And I ran probably 3-4 shows a week. And so being behind the microphone is so I love being on stage. Don't get me wrong. It's like, obviously what I want to be when I grow up. But there's something about interviewing people, which is such a huge contrast between being a keynote speaker, because when I'm interviewing people, when I'm in your shoes, Mary, I don't say crap. Actually, being on this side of the microphone to me is wildly uncomfortable. If I'm starting to digress very quickly, I was just on another person's podcast and they were doing a really bad job as the host. And I basically took over the show. Started asking them questions because I don't know what was going on. Their mind wasn't in it or whatever. And we got done and he goes, what just happened? I said, well, I figured because of the way that he was asking me questions that he didn't have a format for his, a lot of people just get behind the microphone, Mary, and think that they're going to be a great podcaster. And that's not the case. It's like being a keynote speaker.
It's work.
You have no idea.
Yeah.
So I got off the stage last week, and the woman who brought me there came up and she's like, man, it just felt like you were just talking to us. Was that like just all extemporaneous? I was like, no, I practiced that speech like 150 times just before this because I want you to feel that it's just me, But anyway, so that's really what happened with this guy. He just wasn't prepared for the show. And I was like, I just realized very quickly that I don't think you've ever done a show talking about yourself. And I just wanted to ask you a few questions. And of course, he was like so excited about talking about himself that the whole last part of the podcast ended up being about him, which is totally fine. But at the end, he's like, on the show, I've never really talked a lot about myself. I was like, I felt that. And he was like, how did you pick up on that? And I was like, well, we're talking about my book, Shut the F Up and Listen. And I just got done talking to you about pace, pentameter, volume, inflection, and how you can really see the subtext of what's going on in somebody's communication if you really know how to listen. And he was like, wow. I was like, yeah, well,
there's the magic.
There it is. There's the magic. So.
Well, Matt, this has been so enlightening. And every time we get together, I feel like we could go on 15 different rabbit hole stories. So I have to say, I love hearing your stories. And if you're looking to book a speaker who can challenge your audience to show up differently and someone who blends both bold storytelling and practical takeaways, Matt Halloran is a must. We're so glad to have you on the show. If you want to learn more and book Matt, go to keynote.financial. And thanks for joining us on Financial Behavior Thought Leaders. We'll be back soon with more conversations that bring you closer to the leading voices in financial services. Thanks, Matt.